Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I'm glad to be here. My name is Goz, and we're talking property development. We're talking property development from a project management perspective, and we are also talking about real deals. We are covering lots of grounds from case studies to success stories to failures, but at the same time, we're progressing through the natural process of property development from the beginning to all the way to project completion. It's been a bit of a slow start. We'll try and change that. Now, our last episode, we talked about due diligence. And today, I wanted to touch base a bit on what actually happens after due diligence. So, what that means. So, let's just say we've gone through the due diligence process. We've done all the planning due diligence. We've done our we've done underground checks. We have done legal due diligence. We've done our feasibilities. We've looked at the timeframes and the programs. We've also met and we've spoken to some agents to get a little bit more understanding about the current market conditions, but also particularly about the site that we're looking at. What are the revenues like? What is the demand? What's the competition at hand? But also what's coming in the area, and really just flash out all of those things. And at last, we've had a discussion with the QS to get a bit more understanding on the on the construction costs and any other things that we need to be aware. So let's just say that up to this point, we've gone through that process and we've put it all together nicely in a due diligence report that we use it for our internal use. Or if we were managing someone else's project, we actually use that to present it to our clients. That due diligence report also comes in at very handy at a later stage to reflect back to see what was initially projected, what was initially estimated, and how are we actually tracking against that. It's your benchmark in a way, but it's not quite yet the baseline, if that makes sense. And we'll get into that when we get into the project management plan. We're out of the due diligence report. What's the next thing? The next thing is really we need to authorize the project. And what that means is we need to formalize the development. We need to formally agree that we are now ready to start spending resources on this project. And that is the project charter. A project charter is almost like a phase document. So it's a gate document. So a project charter is a formal document that authorizes the project. It defines its purpose, the objectives, the key scopes. It talks about who the key stakeholders are, and it's identifying the key stakeholders, the governments, and also a high-level plan. This is a very important document that many, if not everyone, skips because we naturally tend to jump into doing the work. As soon as we've done the due diligence, we're happy with the numbers. We can see we've got a project and it's, whoa, this is getting exciting. Let's move into the project. It doesn't take a long time to prepare this type of document, especially if you have a template. And if you don't, you can easily download these things. You can go to websites like Smartsheets. You can also, these days, do lots of research online with some of the more popular AI platforms where you can easily even made a project charter that's specific to industry or the project that you're working on. Project charter gets completed, gets prepared, and it needs to be signed by the project sponsor. And that's about it, actually. It needs to be signed by the project sponsor, which formally authorizes spending resources on the project. From that moment, we actually get authorized to start working on the project. That's that's really the project charter. So the next bit is we're still into that initiation stage. We haven't actually quite gotten into the planning stage. We're not really working on the project management plan. We're not even briefing consultants to start engaging them. We've signed up the project charter. We've authorized to spend resources. And so what's the next stage? The next stage is we really need to create something special. We really need to create a good vibe for the team. We need to excite the team. We need to excite the client or excite ourselves if that's our own project. But at the same time, we need to be very clear on what our objectives are, on what our vision is, and what is the project about? What's the brief? What's the outcome? What are we trying to achieve? So So that takes us to the next step, which is preparing the project brief and the project vision. These two can be two standalone documents. I tend to do it as one document it's just easier to manage. And I call it the project brief and vision document. The project vision is really the aspirational statement that explains why the project exists and what it seeks to achieve and what is the bigger picture. That is the project vision. And it speaks more to the purpose and the long-term outcomes rather than the actual deliverables. So it's the North Star. The project brief is a document that, in my view, is critical before you start talking to your consultants. The vision document, the project vision, is also very critical because you want your team to know exactly what's the end goal, what's the vision, what's the big picture, why are we doing this in the first place. But the project brief goes a little bit more granular. It actually talks about what is the expectation of the project to meet the project vision, if that makes sense. And so in this project brief, I typically like to include things like how many apartments, how many car spaces, what's important for the project success. For example, what level of finishes, what sort of a level of appliances are we talking about? What is it? Also, don't forget, this project brief document goes to all of the consultants, including your architect and your interior designer. So they need to have some sort of a baseline to work from before they can apply their skills and get creative into your project. So the project brief and the vision, it gives them a really good foundation as to what's expected from the project. And then in the project brief, it talks about more like breaking it down as to exactly what we want to see in the project to be able to make it a success story based on our initial due diligence, based on our initial numbers, on the construction cost, the yield, and so on. And so to summarize it, the best is to think of it this way. Project charter is the contract that authorizes the project. Project brief is your map. It's almost like a blueprint that tells everyone what to deliver. The project vision, it's really the North Star that tells everyone why it matters and what success would look and feel like. And so today I'm just looking at my notes in my program. We have touch base at due diligence. We've talked about the project charter. We talked about the project brief and the vision. That's all it goes into this initiation stage. There is one more thing that goes in it, which is the site acquisition. The site acquisition is really the process of acquiring the land. And that process sometimes can be done almost in a two-stage process where, you're exchanging now, and then quite often on bigger sites, development sites, the settlement will be, say, in 6 months' time, 4 months' time, 8 months' time, whatever the case might be. So initiation, due diligence, project charter, project brief, and vision, and the land acquisition. Those are the key stages within that first stage that I like to call it initiation. And these to me are very important. One, for setting up the foundations for the whole team. Two, for setting up expectations for the client, because somewhere in the project, setting up expectations from a client's perspective. But also, we're going to be working on this project for a very long time, and we're going to have a lot of consultants engaged. It'll be a big team. These people work on multiple projects. Most of these projects don't have this type of documents. And so a lot of the people that come and go on the projects, let's say, they don't know what the big picture is. They don't know what the higher vision is. And I feel like without these documents, it's very hard to excite your team. Sometimes teams can get excited just by the location of the project or by the size of the project. And especially if it's a prominent project or if it's been delivered by a prominent figure, someone that people know of, and that's how you can get excited. That's one way to get your team really excited and really committed to the project. But if you need to, for lack of a better word, manufacture that excitement and really capture your team in that little bubble and make sure that it's enjoyable and pleasant for them to work on your project, you really need to have these documents, the brief, the vision, the excitement around what you're trying to achieve, why we're trying to achieve. And really that vision, it shouldn't really just be the focus. It's not about the project itself. It's about what the project will do. How is it going to change the environment? How is it going to change people's lives? What is it going to do how is it going to improve the environment or improve people's lives? And it's almost like working in an organization that doesn't have a long-term plan, doesn't have a vision. And we all know the story that lately, especially in the past 5 to 10 years, that people are hopping from one organization to another organization. And one of the key reasons is because the company doesn't have a vision, doesn't have a culture, doesn't have a purpose, and they don't know where they're going. They're just making money if they are, and they're just grinding and day after day. And employers want to feel that they're part of something bigger, something more exciting. This is the same thing. If you could see your project almost as a little organization, because in a way it is going to be a little organization that needs to function very well and collaborate really strongly for the next, say, 2, 3, 4 years, depending on the size of the project. This is the foundation for that. So I would really encourage people not to skip this step and really focus on it before moving on to the next stage. And I'm only going to give you a hint of what the next stage is. We actually, as soon as we do that project brief, vision, and project charger, we're actually out of that initiation phase and we're moving into the planning. And the planning, the very first thing that we're doing is preparing the project management plan, which is quite the extensive plan and quite the extensive document that we're going to go through on our next episode. And then as part of that project management plan, almost as a separate stage, there's a bit of another stage that I created myself that's called the approval pathway and strategy. And I will explain a little bit in more detail why we have that as a separate stage and what the benefit out of that is. But for now, please keep this in mind. Reach out to me if you want to find out a little bit more about this documents, or I can help. I'm more than happy to help anyone that needs a hand or needs a bit of a guidance. But I would definitely, whether you're running your own project, whether you're managing someone else's project, I would encourage you to not skip these stages and go through them thoroughly. Thanks again. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.